Sometimes the hardest prisons are the ones we build for ourselves, one stone of shame at a time, until we forget there was ever a door. Elena Hartwell had been building her prison for 12 years, ever since the day her 17-year-old daughter Cassie vanished without a trace from their ranch in the Tobacco Root Mountains of southwestern Montana. The sheriff called it a runaway situation. The neighbors whispered darker theories. And Elena, she'd stopped trying to explain that her daughter wouldn't just leave, that something terrible must have happened, that someone needed to keep looking. After 2 years of searching, of posting flyers that the wind tore down, of following dead-end leads that went nowhere, Elena had retreated to the most remote corner of her family's 800-acre ranch. She'd taken only what fit in her truck: clothes, tools, her grandfather's surveying equipment, and a single photograph of Cassie laughing on horseback, her dark hair flying in the wind. The old line cabin sat at 8,400 feet, accessible only by a trail so rough it discouraged visitors. That was exactly what Elena wanted. No more pitying looks. No more whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. No more well-meaning people telling her it was time to move on. Time to accept that Cassie was gone. Now at 53, Elena lived a life stripped to its essentials. She kept a small herd of horses that she trained and sold to pay property taxes. She grew what food the short growing season allowed. She collected rainwater and snowmelt in cistern tanks. She read by lamplight and heated with what she cut herself. The solitude had become a kind of companion, filling the spaces where conversation used to be. She learned to find comfort in the rhythm of seasons, in the reliable patterns of weather and wildlife. The mountains didn't judge. They didn't offer useless platitudes. They simply existed, indifferent and eternal, and there was a strange peace in that. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story is touching you already, make sure you're subscribed. I've got something extra special saved for tomorrow. Elena was checking fence line on a cold October morning when she first saw the horse. The wind carried the scent of early snow, that particular metallic smell that came before the first real storm of the season. She'd been working her way along the eastern boundary of her property, replacing rotted posts and tightening wire that had loosened over the summer. Her own horses were turned out in the meadow behind the cabin. So when she saw movement through the aspens, she assumed it was an elk or maybe one of the black bears fattening up for winter. But then the shape moved into a clearing, and Elena's breath caught. It was a horse, a bay mare, maybe 15 hands, with a white blaze down her face and 3 white socks. She was thin, ribs showing through a dull coat, and she moved with the careful deliberation of an animal in pain. Even from a distance, Elena could see the limp, the way the mare favored her right front leg. Elena stood perfectly still, years of horsemanship telling her not to make sudden movements. The mare had stopped at the edge of the clearing, her head low, her breathing labored. Elena could hear it from 30 yards away, the harsh, wet sound of lungs that weren't working right. "Easy, girl," Elena said softly, taking a slow step forward. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The mare's ears flicked toward her voice, but she didn't run. That alone told Elena how sick the animal was. A healthy horse would have bolted at the sight of a stranger. This one just stood there, swaying slightly, as if standing took all the energy she had left. Elena moved closer, speaking in the low, steady tone she'd learned from her grandfather, who'd trained horses for 60 years before arthritis finally stilled his hands. "That's it. You're all right. Let me have a look at you." When she was close enough to touch, Elena could see the full extent of the mare's condition. The limp came from an abscess on the right front hoof, painful but treatable. But it was the mare's breathing that worried Elena more. The wet, rattling sound suggested pneumonia, probably brought on by exposure and malnutrition. Without treatment, the mare would be dead within days, maybe sooner. Elena ran her hands gently along the mare's neck, feeling for injuries, checking her temperature by touch. The horse was burning with fever, her coat soaked with sweat despite the cold morning air. "Where did you come from?" Elena murmured, looking for any identifying marks. No brand, no ear tags, nothing to indicate ownership. The mare's hooves were overgrown, suggesting months of neglect. Her mane was matted with burrs, her tail tangled. But there was something else, something that made Elena's heart stutter in her chest. Around the mare's neck, barely visible beneath the matted mane, was a braided leather cord, and hanging from that cord was a small silver pendant. Elena's hands trembled as she pulled the pendant free, brushing away dirt and sweat to see it clearly. It was a simple design, a mountain with a star above it, hand-carved from silver that had tarnished with age. But Elena knew this pendant. She'd seen it 1,000 times. She'd given it to Cassie for her 16th birthday. The world tilted sideways. Elena gripped the mare's mane to keep from falling, her vision graying at the edges. This wasn't possible. Cassie had been wearing that pendant the day she disappeared. Elena had described it to the sheriff, had included it in every missing person report, had seen it in her dreams for 12 years. Where did you get this? Elena whispered to the horse, her voice breaking. Where's Cassie? Where's my daughter? The mare turned her head slowly, her dark eyes meeting Elena's, and in that moment, something passed between them, some understanding that went beyond words. The horse took a step forward, then another, moving away from Elena, back toward the aspens. Then she stopped and looked back, waiting. Elena understood. The mare was asking her to follow. Every rational part of Elena's brain screamed that this was madness. The horse was sick, probably delirious, wandering randomly through the mountains. The pendant could have been found anywhere, could have been on this horse's neck for years, meaning nothing. But Elena's hands were already moving, already removing the coil of rope from her belt, already fashioning a makeshift halter. She'd spent 12 years learning to live with unanswered questions. She wasn't going to ignore this one. All right, Elena said, her voice steadier now. Show me. She looped the rope gently around the mare's neck, taking care not to put pressure on the windpipe. The horse accepted the rope without resistance, then turned and began walking back the way she'd come. They moved slowly through the forest, the mare setting a pace that accommodated her injuries. Elena followed, one hand on the rope, the other touching the pendant in her pocket over and over, as if physical contact could somehow unlock its secrets. The terrain grew rougher as they climbed. They crossed a creek bed that was mostly dry this late in the season, then wound through a stand of lodgepole pine, so thick Elena had to duck to avoid low-hanging branches. The mare never hesitated, moving as if she knew exactly where she was going. After about an hour, they emerged onto a ridge Elena didn't recognize, even though she'd lived on this land her entire life. That wasn't entirely surprising. 800 acres was a lot of territory, and much of it was wilderness she rarely explored. But something about this place felt different, felt hidden in a way that seemed deliberate. The mare stopped at the base of a cliff face, its surface covered in lichen and moss. To anyone else, it would have looked like solid rock, nothing more. But the mare walked directly to a section where the rock curved inward, creating a shadow that looked like nothing but darkness. Elena approached carefully, her pulse quickening. As she got closer, she could see what the shadow concealed, a narrow opening in the rock, maybe 4 feet high and 3 feet wide. Not quite a cave, not quite a tunnel. Something in between. The mare stood at the entrance, her breath coming in harsh, wet gasps. She was spent. Elena could see that. The walk had taken the last of her strength. She swayed on her feet, and Elena moved quickly to support her weight. Easy, girl. You did good. You got me here. The mare's legs buckled then, and Elena couldn't hold her. The horse went down slowly, almost gently, her breath rattling. Elena knelt beside her, one hand on the mare's neck, feeling the fever burning through her. I'm sorry, Elena whispered. I'm so sorry. She'd seen enough dying horses in her life to recognize when treatment was beyond reach. The pneumonia was too advanced, the fever too high. Even if she could get the mare back to the cabin, even if she had antibiotics, it would be too late. The mare's breathing slowed, each breath coming further apart. Her eyes, dark and intelligent even now, fixed on Elena's face. Then, with what seemed like her last bit of strength, the mare turned her head toward the tunnel entrance. Elena understood. The horse had brought her here for a reason. Whatever was inside that tunnel, that was what mattered. I'll look, Elena promised. I'll find whatever you wanted me to find. The mare's eyes closed. Her breath came one more time, then stopped in the sudden silence. Elena could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the wind moving to the pines, could hear the distant cry of a hawk somewhere overhead. She sat with the horse for a long moment, her hand still resting on the mare's neck, feeling the warmth slowly leave the body. She thought about Cassie, about the pendant, about 12 years of unanswered questions. Then Elena stood, pulled her flashlight from her jacket pocket, and stepped into the darkness of the tunnel. The tunnel was narrow at first, barely wide enough for Elena's shoulders. She had to duck her head to avoid scraping it on the low ceiling. The rock walls were rough, showing tool marks that suggested human hands had widened this natural fissure, though whether recently or a century ago, Elena couldn't tell. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing a passage that curved gently downward. The air inside was cool and still, carrying a mineral smell that reminded Elena of the old mine shaft that dotted these mountains, remnant of the brief gold rush that had brought her great-grandfather to Montana in 1885. She moved carefully, testing her footing with each step. The floor was uneven, littered with fallen rock and debris. In places, timber supports had been installed to shore up the ceiling, though many of these were rotted and sagging with age. After about 50 feet, the passage opened into a wider chamber. Elena swept her flashlight around, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The chamber was roughly circular, maybe 20 feet across, with a ceiling high enough that she could stand upright. Along one wall, someone had built crude shelving from scrap lumber, and on those shelves, Elena's breath caught. On the shelves were supplies, canned goods, bottled water, blankets still in plastic packaging, first aid kits, flashlights, batteries. Everything looked relatively new, certainly not decades old. Someone had been using this tunnel. Recently, Elena moved to the shelves, her mind racing. She picked up a can of soup, checking the expiration date. 2 months from now, she opened one of the plastic storage boxes and found clothing. Women's clothing in various sizes, still folded, still clean. This was a shelter. Someone had created a hidden shelter in this tunnel, stocked with supplies for what? Emergencies? Or something else? Her flashlight beam caught something else then, in the far corner of the chamber. A small wooden box, about the size of a shoebox, sitting on the floor with a piece of paper tucked under its lid. Elena's hand shook as she crossed the chamber and knelt beside the box. The paper was regular notebook paper, the kind kids use in school, and written on it in handwriting that made Elena's heart stop was a single word: Mom. Elena's vision blurred with tears. She knew that handwriting. She'd seen it on school assignments, on birthday cards, on notes left on the refrigerator. It was Cassie's handwriting. With trembling fingers, Elena opened the box. Inside were more papers, letters, dozens of them, all addressed to Mom in Cassie's familiar hand. Elena pulled out the first one, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold the paper steady enough to read. Mom, I don't know if you'll ever find these. I don't even know if I should be writing them. But I need you to know I didn't run away. I need you to know I didn't leave you on purpose. That day I disappeared. I was coming home from Sarah's house on the shortcut through the south pasture, the one you always told me not to take alone. I know I should have listened. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Men loading boxes from trucks into the old root cellar at the Peterson property, the one nobody's supposed to use anymore. They saw me. They chased me. I tried to run, tried to get to the ranch, but they caught me. They said I'd seen too much, that I couldn't go home until they were done with their business. They said if I tried to escape, or if I told anyone, they'd hurt you. They showed me pictures of you, Mom. Pictures they'd taken without you knowing. They knew where you slept, where you walked, what time you came home every night. I couldn't risk them hurting you. So I went with them. They took me to a house in Butte, kept me locked in a basement. There were other girls there, too. All of us had seen something we shouldn't have, or had information someone wanted, or came from families with money or land, or something these people wanted. I've been moved around a lot over the years. Different houses, different states sometimes. They use us, Mom. They make us do things I can't write about. They break us down until we forget who we were before. Some of the girls, they don't even remember their real names anymore. But I remembered. I remembered you in the ranch and riding horses in the summer. I remembered Grandpa teaching me to read survey maps. I remembered every single thing about home, and I held on to it like a lifeline. 6 months ago, they moved me to a property not far from our ranch. I couldn't believe it when I realized where I was. After 12 years, I was so close to home I could almost see the mountains I grew up in. I started planning. The men who guard us, they're not always smart, and they're lazy. They get comfortable. I watched, I waited, and I found this tunnel. I don't know who made it or when, but it was here and it was hidden, and I started stocking it with supplies stolen one piece at a time. This is my escape route, Mom. When the time is right, when I'm sure I can make it without them catching me and hurting you, I'm going to run. I'm going to use this tunnel to hide until I can get help, real help, from people these men can't threaten or buy off. But if something goes wrong, if they find out what I'm planning, I need you to know I tried. I need you to know I survived. And I need you to find the evidence I've hidden here, because these people need to be stopped. I love you, Mom. I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day. Cassie. Elena read the letter 3 times before her brain could process what was telling her. Cassie was alive. Had been alive 6 months ago when she wrote this. Had been close by. So close Elena could have reached her if she'd only known where to look. Elena grabbed another letter, then another, reading frantically. The letters spanned 6 months, each one adding more details. Cassie described the property where she was being held, an old ranch compound about 15 miles southeast of Elena's property. She described the men who ran the operation, at least 6 of them, led by someone she knew only as D, who seemed to be in charge. She described the other girls, 8 in total, ranging in age from 16 to 25. Some had been there for years. Some were new. All of them were prisoners, held through a combination of physical confinement and psychological manipulation. And she described what these men were doing beyond just holding the girls. They were running something bigger, a trafficking network that moved through Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. The root cellar Cassie had stumbled across that day 12 years ago was just one drop point in a network of dozens. The last letter was dated 3 weeks ago. Mom, it's happening tonight. One of the new girls. They call her Lily, but I don't think that's her real name. She tried to escape last week. They caught her and brought her back, and now they're planning to make an example of her tomorrow. I can't let that happen. I can't watch another girl get hurt, because I was too scared to do something. I'm going to try to get Lily out tonight, and anyone else who's willing to run. It's risky. It's probably stupid. But I can't live with myself if I don't try. I've hidden everything in this tunnel. Photos of the men, license plates, addresses of properties they use, names of people they've paid off. It's all here in a waterproof case in the back chamber. If something happens to me, if they catch me, please find it. Please make sure these men can't hurt anyone else. There's a mare in the barn where they keep us. She's sick, and they're planning to shoot her tomorrow because she's no use to them anymore. I'm going to set her loose when we run. She's smart, that horse. She'll find her way to good grazing, to water. Maybe she'll find her way home to wherever she came from. I'm leaving this last letter for you. I don't know if I'll make it out, but I hope I do. I hope the next time I write to you, it won't be in a letter hidden in a tunnel. It'll be face-to-face, in our kitchen, drinking the terrible coffee you make that you think is good. I love you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me. I know you didn't. I know you've been looking. I know you never stopped believing I was out there somewhere. Your daughter, Cassie. Elena's hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. 3 weeks ago. Cassie had tried to escape 3 weeks ago, which meant either she'd made it or... Elena couldn't finish that thought. She couldn't let herself go there. Not yet. Not until she knew for sure. She grabbed her flashlight and stood, looking deeper into the tunnel. Cassie had mentioned a back chamber, a place where she'd hidden evidence. Elena needed to find it. Needed to find everything Cassie had left behind. The tunnel continued past the supply chamber, narrowing again before opening into a second space. This one was smaller, more of a natural cave than a carved passage. And in the back corner, wrapped in multiple layers of plastic and sealed with duct tape, was a large waterproof case. Elena pulled it open with hands that felt disconnected from her body. Inside were documents, photographs, USB drives, and a detailed map marked with locations. Elena spread them out on the cave floor, using her flashlight to examine each piece. The photographs showed faces: men in casual clothes, men in suits, men working on ranches, and men standing in front of government buildings. Cassie had labeled each photo with names and roles. Some were labeled guard. Others were boss or driver or customer. Elena's stomach turned at that last category. These weren't just men running a trafficking operation. These were men buying time with the girls they held captive. The documents were financial records, showing payments made from various LLC companies to individuals across 3 states. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of thousands of dollars moving through accounts that Cassie had somehow managed to document. And the USB drives. Elena couldn't look at those here. She'd need a computer. But Cassie had labeled them clearly: video evidence, audio recordings, property records, victim statements. This wasn't just evidence of a crime. This was a complete case file, compiled over months or maybe years by a 17-year-old girl who became a 29-year-old woman in captivity. Elena's daughter had survived. More than survived, she'd fought back. She'd documented everything. She'd built an escape route and gathered evidence and made sure that even if she didn't make it out, the truth would. Elena carefully repacked the waterproof case, her mind already working through what needed to happen next. She needed to get this evidence to authorities who couldn't be bought. She needed to find out if Cassie had escaped, and if so, where she was. And she needed to do it in a way that wouldn't alert the men who'd held her daughter captive for 12 years. She was halfway back through the first chamber when she heard it, voices, echoing faintly from the tunnel entrance. Men's voices getting closer. Elena's blood turned to ice. She killed her flashlight and pressed herself against the tunnel wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might give her away. "Horse is dead right outside," one voice was saying. "Someone's been here." "Probably just a hiker," another voice replied. "Saw the dead animal. Came to investigate." "In late October? Nobody hikes up here this time of year. It's too damn cold." "So what do you want to do? Search the tunnel?" "Yeah, and if you find anyone in there, we got a problem that needs solving." Footsteps echoed in the narrow passage. A beam of light swept across the wall where Elena crouched. She had maybe seconds before they reached the first chamber, before they saw her. Elena's hands found a rock on the ground, something heavy enough to matter. She wasn't going to go down without a fight. She'd spent 12 years not knowing what happened to her daughter. Now that she finally had answers, she'd be damned if she let these men take them away. The footsteps grew closer. The light beam swept across the chamber. Elena gripped the rock tighter, her breath caught in her chest, waiting for the moment when a sound echoed from outside the tunnel. A horse's whinny, sharp and urgent. Then another and another, multiple horses, making noise that carried to the mountain silence. The footsteps stopped. The light beam swung back toward the entrance. "What the hell? I thought there was only one dead horse out there. There's 3 more. Where did they come from?" "I don't know, but they're between us and the truck." "Move it. We need to secure the perimeter." The footsteps retreated, moving quickly now. The voices faded. Elena waited, counting her heartbeats, making herself stay still even though every instinct screamed to run. When she was sure they were gone, Elena moved carefully through the tunnel toward the entrance. She crept to the opening and peered out into the afternoon light. The 2 men were standing about 50 yards away, next to a white pickup truck with Montana plates. And between them and the tunnel entrance were 4 horses. Elena's horses, the ones she'd turned out in the meadow that morning. Somehow, they'd traveled miles from her property to this ridge, and now they stood blocking the path, refusing to move despite the men's attempts to shoo them away. Elena's throat tightened. Horses were herd animals, protective of their own. They must have followed her scent, followed the same trail the dying mare had taken, and now they were giving her a chance to escape. She didn't waste it. Elena slipped out of the tunnel while the men were focused on the horses, moving low and fast through the trees. She had the waterproof case under one arm, Cassie's letters stuffed in her jacket pockets. Behind her, she could hear the men's frustrated shouts as the horses continued to block their path. Elena ran. She ran until her lungs burned and her legs trembled. Ran until she could no longer hear the men's voices. Ran until she reached familiar territory and knew she could find her way home even in darkness. Only then did she stop, leaning against a tree, gasping for breath, clutching the case that held 12 years of her daughter's suffering and survival and determination. "Thank you," Elena whispered to the horses, to the dying mare who'd led her to the tunnel, to whatever force had brought everything together in this moment. Thank you. She was 3 miles from her cabin, with evidence that could bring down a trafficking network and maybe, just maybe, lead her to Cassie. If her daughter had escaped 3 weeks ago, where would she go? If she'd been afraid to come home, afraid that putting Elena in danger, where would she hide? Elena's mind worked through the possibilities as she started walking again, moving faster now, urgency pushing her forward. She needed to get home, needed to secure this evidence, needed to figure out her next move. The sun was touching the western peaks when Elena finally reached her cabin. Her horses had beaten her there, somehow finding their own way back. They stood in the meadow, unconcerned, as if their afternoon adventure had been nothing unusual. Elena went inside and locked the door behind her, something she rarely bothered doing. But today was different. Today, she had something to protect that mattered more than anything had mattered in 12 years. She cleared her kitchen table and spread out the evidence, organizing it into categories. Photos here, documents there, USB drives and a safe pile. She needed to review everything, needed to understand the full scope of what Cassie had documented. But first, she needed to see if the USB drives contained anything that would tell her where Cassie might be now. Elena pulled out her old laptop, ancient by modern standards but functional. She'd kept it for checking weather reports and managing the ranch's meager finances. Now she plugged in the first USB drive, labeled victim statements. The drive contained video files, each one labeled with a date and initials. Elena clicked on the first one, and her daughter's face filled the screen. Cassie looked older, worn down in ways that made Elena's heart break. Her dark hair was shorter than Elena remembered, her face thinner. But her eyes still held that fierce intelligence Elena had always loved, that stubborn determination that ran in the family. "My name is Cassandra Marie Hartwell," Cassie said to the camera, her voice steady despite the pain Elena could see behind it. "I'm 29 years old, and I was abducted from my family's ranch in Madison County, Montana, when I was 17. I've been held against my will for 12 years by an organized trafficking network operating across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming." Cassie went on to describe everything. The day of her abduction, the houses where she'd been held, the men who ran the operation, the other girls who'd been trapped alongside her. She spoke clearly, factually, as if giving testimony in court, which Elena realized was exactly what she'd been doing. Cassie had been building a case, documenting everything she could in case she ever got the chance to bring these men to justice. Other files on the drive contained similar statements from other girls, 8 in total, just as Cassie's letters had said. Each one told a story of abduction, of manipulation, of years lost to captivity. Some of the girls' faces were blank, their voices monotone, as if they retreated so far inside themselves that the person speaking was just a shell. Others, like Cassie, still showed sparks of the people they'd been before. Elena watched every video, forcing herself to bear witness to what her daughter and these other girls had survived. She owed them that much. She owed them her attention, her rage, her absolute commitment to making sure the men who'd done this were held accountable. The next USB drive was labeled Property Records. It contained documents showing ownership of various properties across 3 states, ranches, houses, warehouses, all connected through shell companies and LLC filings that obscured the real owners. But Cassie had traced the connections, drawing lines between properties and companies and individuals, building a map of the entire network. One property was circled in red on the digital map, a ranch 15 miles southeast of Elena's property, owned by something called Highline Holdings, LLC. A note in Cassie's handwriting read, "This is where they held us. Main compound. 6 guards at any time. Security system on all buildings." Elena zoomed in on the map, memorizing every detail. If Cassie had escaped, she might have headed for the nearest town, or for the interstate, or for somewhere safe where she could call for help. But Elena had a different theory. If Cassie had escaped 3 weeks ago and hadn't come home, hadn't contacted authorities, there was a reason. Either she was still afraid of putting Elena in danger, or she was trying to help the other girls escape. Or she'd been caught. Elena's stomach clenched at that thought, but she forced herself to stay rational, to think like Cassie would think. If Cassie had been caught, the men would have searched the tunnel. They would have found the evidence. The fact that the evidence was still there, untouched until today, suggested Cassie had either escaped successfully or was still in hiding. The third USB drive was labeled guard schedules and patrol routes. Elena opened it, finding documents that detail the daily operations at the main compound. Guard shifts, patrol patterns, security camera locations. Everything someone would need if they were planning to infiltrate the property or escape from it. Elena studied the documents until she'd memorized them. Then she opened the final USB drive, labeled simply D. The drive contained a single video file. Elena clicked play, and a man's face filled the screen. He was maybe 50, with gray in his brown hair, and the kind of face that would be unremarkable in any crowd. He wore an expensive suit and stood in what looked like an office, speaking to someone off camera. "I don't care how you handle it," the man was saying, his voice calm and cultured. "Just make sure the problem is resolved quietly. We spent too many years building this operation to have it compromised by one girl who couldn't keep her mouth shut." The camera angle shifted slightly, and Elena realized this had been filmed secretly, probably on a phone someone had hidden. The man continued speaking, discussing logistics of moving merchandise between properties, complaining about clients who were becoming too demanding. He never said anything explicitly incriminating, but the context, combined with everything else Cassie had documented, painted a clear picture. This man, D, was running the entire operation. At the end of the video, the camera zoomed in on something on the man's desk, a nameplate, Dalton Vickers, CEO, Vickers Property Management. Elena grabbed one of the documents from the pile on her table, scanning through corporate records. There, Vickers Property Management was listed as the parent company for dozens of LLCs, including Highline Holdings, the company that owned the ranch where Cassie had been held. She had a name. She had a face. She had evidence. Now she needed to figure out what to do with it. Elena sat back in her chair, her mind racing through options. She could take this evidence to the local sheriff. But Cassie's notes indicated at least 2 deputies were on Vickers' payroll. She could drive to Bozeman or Helena, take it to state police or FBI, but that would take time. And if Cassie was still out there somewhere, if she was in danger, time was something Elena didn't have. She needed help, but it had to be the right kind of help. Someone who couldn't be bought, who had resources, who could act quickly. Elena pulled out her phone, a satellite phone she kept for emergencies, since cell service didn't reach her cabin. She scrolled through her minimal contact list, stopping on a name she hadn't called in years. Marcus Reed. He'd been a homicide detective with Montana Highway Patrol when Cassie first disappeared. He'd been one of the few people who believed Elena when she said Cassie wouldn't have run away, who'd pushed for a more thorough investigation. But he'd been overruled by his superiors, who classified it as a runaway case and moved on. Marcus had retired from Highway Patrol 5 years ago, but Elena had heard through the small-town gossip network that he'd started a private investigation firm specializing in cold cases. He'd moved to Bozeman, was working with victims' families who'd been failed by official investigations. If anyone would help, it would be Marcus. Elena dialed the number, her heart pounding. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. Reed Investigations. "Marcus, it's Elena Hartwell." There was a pause. "Elena, I haven't heard from you in years. How are you holding up?" "I found Cassie." Another pause, longer this time. "What do you mean you found her?" "I mean she's alive. Or she was 3 weeks ago. And I have evidence of who took her and why." Elena's voice was steady now, certain. "I need your help, Marcus. I need it today. Tell me everything." Elena did. She spent 30 minutes walking Marcus through the discovery of the dying horse, the tunnel, The letters, the evidence. She sent photos of key documents to his email while they talked. She could hear him typing, making notes, asking sharp questions that told her he was taking this seriously. "Elena, this is big," Marcus said finally. "Bigger than local law enforcement can handle. We need to bring in federal agents." "Can you do that? Without alerting anyone who might be compromised?" "I have contacts at the FBI field office in Helena. Good people I'd trust with my life. Let me make some calls. In the meantime, you need to secure that evidence and yourself. If Vickers people find out you have this..." "I know. They already know someone was in the tunnel. I barely got out before they found me." "Then you're not safe at your cabin. Pack what you need and get to a public place. Somewhere with people around. I'll coordinate with FBI, and we'll come to you." "I'm not leaving," Elena said firmly. "Not until I know where Cassie is." "Elena? She's my daughter, Marcus. She spent 12 years surviving, so she could gather this evidence. I'm not going to hide now. I'm going to find her." Marcus sighed. "You're as stubborn as I remember." "All right, but at least promise me you'll stay alert. Keep that satellite phone charged and on you at all times. And if anyone approaches your property, anyone at all, you call me immediately." "I promise. I'll have agents there by morning. They'll want to see everything, take formal statements, start building a prosecution." "But Elena," Marcus paused, "prepare yourself for the possibility that Cassie didn't make it out. These people, if they caught her trying to escape..." "She made it," Elena said, with a certainty she didn't quite feel. "She's smart, Marcus. She survived 12 years. She wouldn't give up now." After they hung up, Elena sat in the gathering darkness of her cabin, looking at her daughter's evidence spread across the table. Somewhere out there, Cassie was either free or still fighting to be free. And Elena was going to find her, going to bring her home, no matter what it took. The horses whinnied softly in the meadow outside. Elena went to a window and looked out at them. These animals who'd somehow known to follow her today, to protect her when she needed it. "Thank you," she whispered again, "for bringing her back to me." And in the darkness, Elena began to plan. Part 2, the unraveling. The FBI arrived at dawn in 3 black SUVs that looked aggressively out of place on the rutted dirt road leading to Elena's cabin. She'd been awake all night, reviewing evidence and making notes, her mind too wired to sleep. When she heard the vehicles approaching, she stepped onto her porch with coffee in hand, watching as they parked in a careful line. Marcus Reed emerged from the lead vehicle, looking older than Elena remembered, but still carrying himself with that same careful precision. He was followed by 2 men and a woman, all in dark suits that screamed federal law enforcement. "Elena," Marcus said, climbing her porch steps with a hint of a limp she didn't remember from before. "Thank you for trusting me with this. Thank you for coming so quickly." Marcus gestured to his companions. "This is Special Agent Sarah Chun from the FBI's Violent Crimes Against Children Unit, Special Agent Tom Brewster, White Collar Crime, and Agent Ryan Kowalski, Digital Forensics. They're good people. I've worked with them before." Agent Chin stepped forward, extending her hand. She was maybe 40, with sharp eyes that assessed everything without seeming to judge. "Ms. Hartwell, I want you to know we take these allegations extremely seriously. We've been investigating Dalton Vickers for 3 years on suspicion of financial crimes. If what you found connects him to human trafficking, it could finally give us the leverage we need. Come inside," Elena said. "I'll show you everything." They spent the next 4 hours in Elena's small cabin, the agents examining every piece of evidence Cassie had compiled. Agent Chin focused on the victim's statements, her expression growing harder with each video. Agent Brewster studied the financial documents, occasionally letting out low whistles of appreciation for Cassie's thoroughness. Agent Kowalski worked on his laptop, analyzing the digital evidence and making copies of everything. "Your daughter is remarkable," Agent Chin said, looking up from her tablet where she'd been taking notes. "The level of detail here, the organization, this is better than what we see from trained investigators sometimes." She built a complete case file. She had 12 years to work on it, Elena said quietly. "Still, this takes incredible mental strength. To survive what she survived and still maintain this level of focus. Agent Chen shook her head. She's extraordinary. Do you think she escaped? Elena asked, unable to hold the question back any longer. 3 weeks ago, she wrote that she was going to try. I need to know if she made it. Agent Chun exchanged glances with Marcus. We've been checking missing persons reports, hospital admissions. Jane does across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. There's no record of anyone matching Cassie's description being found in the last 3 weeks. Is that good or bad? It means she's either successfully evading detection, or Agent Chin paused, or she's still being held somewhere, possibly a location not included in her documentation. We need to search the main compound, Elena said. The ranch where she was held. It's only 15 miles from here. We could be there in 20 minutes. And if we rush in without proper preparation, we could blow the entire investigation, Agent Brewster said, not unkindly. Vickers has resources. He has lawyers. If we search that property without an airtight warrant, anything we find to be excluded as evidence. So we just do nothing while my daughter might be there? We're not doing nothing, Agent Chin said firmly. We're doing this right. I've already contacted a federal judge I trust. We're preparing warrant applications for the main compound and 6 other properties Cassie identified. By this afternoon, we'll have legal authority to search all of them simultaneously. That fast? When you have evidence this strong, judges move quickly. Agent Chin leaned forward. But Elena, I need you to prepare yourself for what we might find. If Cassie tried to escape and was caught. Don't, Elena said, her voice sharper than she intended. Don't tell me to prepare for the worst. I've spent 12 years living in the worst. I'm preparing for something better. Agent Chin nodded. Then let's make that happen. While the agents worked on warrant applications, Marcus took Elena aside, walking with her out to the meadow where her horses grazed. How are you really holding up? He asked. I don't know. I feel like I'm vibrating at a frequency that might shatter me if I stop moving. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I've seen it before in families who finally get breaks in cold cases. The relief and terror hit at the same time. Elena watched her horses, the same ones who protected her at the tunnel yesterday. I keep thinking about all the time I wasted. 12 years, Marcus. I could have been looking harder, pushing more, refusing to accept. Stop, Marcus interrupted gently. You can't think that way. You did look. You did push. I was there, remember? I saw how hard you fought in those first 2 years. But these people were good at hiding. They had resources, connections, legitimate businesses as cover. Even with everything Cassie documented, it took FBI 3 years to get close to Vickers. But if I hadn't given up, if I hadn't retreated to this cabin, then you wouldn't have been here when that horse found you. Everything that happened yesterday happened because you were in the right place at the right time. Maybe that was luck, or maybe that was something else. But it happened, and now we have a chance to bring Cassie home. Elena's throat tightened. What if it's too late? What if she... We don't know anything yet. So we keep moving forward until we do know. That's all we can do. They walked back to the cabin, where Agent Kowalski was setting up additional computer equipment on Elena's table. I've been analyzing the metadata on these video files, he said, looking up as they entered. The victim statement videos were recorded over a period of 6 months, between last November and May. But there's something interesting in the file properties. What's that? Agent Chin asked, moving closer. They were all edited on the same device, probably a phone or tablet. And that device has a GPS tracker enabled. I can pull location data from the files. Can you tell where Cassie was when she made the edits? Elena asked, her heart speeding up. I can tell you where the device was. Whether Cassie was still with it. Kowalski shrugged. That's harder to say. But the last file was edited 3 weeks ago, which matches the timeline of her escape attempt. And the location isn't the main compound. He turned his laptop so they could see the screen. A map was displayed, with a red pin drop on a location about 30 miles northeast of Elena's property. That's the old Sweetwater Ranch, Marcus said, leaning in. Been abandoned for years. The previous owner died without heirs, and the property's been tied up in probate. Or so the public records say, Agent Brewster said, typing rapidly on his own laptop. But look at this. The property was quietly purchased 2 years ago by an LLC called Mountain View Properties. And Mountain View Properties is owned by, let me guess, Elena said, a subsidiary of Vickers Property Management. Bingo. He's been using that property for something. And if the GPS data is accurate, Cassie was there 3 weeks ago. Agent Chin was already on her phone. I'm adding it to the warrant list. Judge Thompson said he'd have decisions by noon. If he approves, we move simultaneously on all locations at 3 p.m. I'm going with you, Elena said. That's not. I'm going. You can have me ride in one of your SUVs, or I can follow my truck, but I'm going to be there when you search that property. Agent Chin studied her for a long moment. All right, but you stay in the vehicle until we've secured the property. No arguments. No arguments. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible mountain stories like this one. The hours until 3 p.m. crawled by with agonizing slowness. Elena tried to stay busy, tried to be useful, but mostly she just got in the way. The agents worked with focused efficiency, preparing briefing documents, coordinated with other FBI teams, building what Agent Chen called the biggest trafficking takedown Montana scene in 20 years. At noon, Agent Chen's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, then smiled grimly. All warrants approved. We're greenlit for simultaneous execution at 1,500 hours. The agents moved even faster then, gearing up and running through tactical plans. Marcus pulled Elena aside one more time. I'm not going with the teams, he said. I'm a civilian consultant, not law enforcement anymore. So I'm going to stay here, coordinate communications, make sure everything runs smoothly. I should stay too, Elena said, though everything in her wanted to be there when they searched the properties. No, you should be there. If they find Cassie, you should be the first person she sees. Marcus paused. Just be ready for this to go different ways. The best scenario is they find her safe at Sweetwater Ranch, maybe hiding out there while she figures out her next move. Worst case. I know. At 2:30 p.m., Elena climbed into the back seat of Agent Chen's SUV. Another agent, someone who'd arrived later and whom Elena hadn't been introduced to, sat behind the wheel. Agent Chen rode shotgun, talking into a radio, coordinating with 5 other teams who were preparing to hit the different properties simultaneously. Team 1, radio check. Team 1, good to go. In position at main compound. Team 2, radio check. Team 2, set. Watching the Billings warehouse. The radio checks continued. Elena listened to each one, her hands clenched in her lap, her heart hammering so hard she thought the agents in the front seat must be able to hear it. All teams, this is command. We are go for warrant execution in 10 minutes. Repeat, 10 minutes to breach. The drive to Sweetwater Ranch took 20 minutes of winding mountain roads. They were third in a convoy of 4 vehicles, all moving fast but without sirens. The plan was to arrive simultaneously with the other teams, hitting all properties at once so no one could warn anyone else. As they drove, Agent Chun turned in her seat to look at Elena. Whatever we find, we'll get through it together. You understand? Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. The Sweetwater Ranch appeared around a curve in the road, a collection of weathered buildings clustered in a valley, with mountains rising on 3 sides. The main house was 2 stories, its paint peeling and windows dark. Several outbuildings stood nearby, a bar and a machine shed, what looked like old bunkhouses. The SUVs didn't stop at the gate. They drove straight through a chain-link barrier that gave way with barely any resistance. The vehicles split up, each taking a different building. Stay here. Agent Chin ordered Elena. Then she and the other agent were out of the SUV and moving toward the main house, weapons drawn. Elena watched through the windshield, her breath fogging the glass despite the heater running. More agents poured out of the other vehicles, moving with tactical precision, surrounding each building, calling out FBI before breaching doors. The radio crackled constantly. Team 1, compound secured. We have 6 individuals in custody. No sign of Vickers or the victims. Team 2, warehouse clear. Found evidence of occupancy, but no persons on site. Team 3, Butte property clear. Computers and documents seized. No persons. Team 4, Missoula property. Hold on. We've got something. We need medical up here now. Elena's breath stopped. Agent Chun, who'd been inside the main house, came running back to the SUV. She yanked open Elena's door. Come with me. Now! Elena scrambled out, following Agent Chun at a run toward the barn. Other agents were streaming out of the building, several of them supporting a figure between them, a young woman, thin to the point of emaciation, her hair matted, her clothes hanging off a frame. But it wasn't Cassie. Elena's heart sank even as Agent Chun kept pulling her forward into the barn. Inside, the structure had been divided into makeshift rooms using plywood and 2x4s. Most of the rooms were empty, their doors hanging open. But in the last room on the right, huddled in the corner with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, was another young woman. She looked up as Elena and Agent Chin entered. Her hair was shorter than in the photographs Elena had memorized, and her face was thinner, marked by hardship in ways that made Elena's heart break. But her eyes, those dark brown eyes that had been the first thing Elena saw when the doctor handed her a newborn baby 29 years ago, those eyes were unmistakable. "Mom," Cassie whispered, her voice hoarse, disbelieving. Elena crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, dropping to her knees and pulling her daughter into her arms. Cassie felt fragile, all sharp angles and trembling limbs. But she was warm, she was breathing, she was alive. "I've got you," Elena said, tears streaming down her face. "I've got you, baby. You're safe now. You're coming home." Cassie's arms wrapped around Elena's back, gripping tight enough to hurt. She was crying too, her whole body shaking with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside her. I thought they'd find me before you did. I thought..." "Sure, it's okay. We found you. You're safe." Agent Chin crouched down beside them, her voice gentle. "Cassie, I'm Special Agent Sarah Chun with the FBI. We have your evidence. All of it. And we're using it to bring down everyone involved. But right now, I need to know, are there other girls here? Anyone else who needs help?" Cassie pulled back from Elena slightly, wiping her eyes. "There were 4 others with me. They left 2 days ago. I stayed because I couldn't run anymore. I thought if I could just hold on a little longer, maybe someone would find the evidence. Maybe it would matter." "It mattered," Agent Chin said. "Your evidence is going to put these people away for the rest of their lives. You did that. You survived. You documented everything. And you made sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. The other girls, we're looking for them. Do you know where they went?" Cassie shook her head. "They had family in Idaho. One girl's sister lives in Boise. They were going to try to get there, but they didn't tell me exactly where because if I got caught, they didn't want to be able to tell." "Smart," Agent Chin said. "We'll find them. But right now, let's get you looked at by the paramedics. Make sure you're okay." "I'm okay. Cassie looked at Elena, fresh tears spilling over. "I'm sorry I couldn't come home sooner. I was so scared they'd hurt you if I did. They had pictures of you, Mom. They knew where you lived, where you went. I couldn't risk." "I know," Elena said, cupping Cassie's face in her hands. "I read your letters. All of them. I know what you survived. I know what you did. And I'm so proud of you. So incredibly proud." They helped Cassie to her feet, Elena supporting most of her weight. As they walked out of the barn into the afternoon sunlight, ambulances were pulling into the compound. The girl they'd found first was already being loaded into one, and 4 in her arm, paramedics working quickly. A paramedic approached them, taking one look at Cassie and immediately guiding her toward a gurney. "Let's get you checked out, okay? When's the last time you ate?" "Yesterday. There's food here, canned stuff in the house. I've been eating. Just not much." The paramedics started checking vitals, asking questions in that calm, professional tone they all used. Elena stood close, one hand on Cassie's arm, unable to let go even for a second. Agent Chen's radio crackled. Team 1, we have multiple arrests at the main compound. Dalton Vickers is not among them, but we've got a second-in-command and 5 guards. They're not talking. Keep them separated. Agent Chen ordered. We'll start interrogations once we secured all sites. Team 4, we found 4 more women at the Missoula property. All alive, all conscious, requesting additional medical units. Team 5, Idaho Falls property is empty, but we got computers, hard drives, paper files. This place was their record center. Agent Chen listened to each report, her expression grim but satisfied. This is going down exactly like we planned. Vickers can run, but he can't hide. Not anymore. The paramedic finished checking Cassie's vitals and looked at Elena. She's dehydrated and malnourished, but her vitals are stable. I'd like to transport her to the hospital in Bozeman for a full examination. No, Cassie said immediately, grabbing Elena's hand. I'm not going anywhere without my mom. You can ride with her, the paramedic said. There's room. They loaded Cassie into the ambulance, Elena climbing in beside her. As the doors were closing, Agent Chen appeared. I'll follow you to the hospital. We'll need to take Cassie's full statement, but that can wait until she's been cleared medically. Right now, just... Agent Chen smiled, the first real smile Elena had seen from her. Right now, just be together. You've earned that. The ambulance pulled away from Sweetwater Ranch, sirens off, moving at a steady but unhurried pace. Through the back windows, Elena could see more law enforcement vehicles arriving, could see agents moving through the property with cameras and evidence bags, documenting everything. Cassie lay on the gurney, Elena sitting beside her, their hands linked. Neither of them spoke. There would be time for words later, time for explanations and processing and figuring out what came next. Right now, it was enough to just be in the same space, breathing the same air, knowing that the nightmare was finally over. I found your tunnel, Elena said after a while. The one you stocked with supplies. I saw. The supplies were moved around. I knew someone had been there. It was me. A sick mare led me to it. She had your pennant around her neck. Cassie's eyes widened. Star? The bay mare with the white blaze. She died right outside the tunnel entrance, like she used the last of her strength to get me there. She was smart, Cassie said quietly. Smarter than the men gave her credit for. When I let her loose that night, I told her to find good grazing, to find someone who'd take care of her. I didn't think she'd understand. I didn't think she'd actually lead anyone to the tunnel. Animals know things, Elena said. Your grandfather always said that. They know things we can't explain. He taught me to read survey maps. Did you know that? Before he died, he spent hours teaching me how to read topography, how to use a compass, how to find my way in the wilderness. That's how I found the tunnel, in the first place. I was studying the terrain around the compound, looking for anything that might help us escape, and I found this anomaly on an old survey map, a marking that indicated a cave system. So I went looking. He'd be proud of you, for surviving, for fighting back. I did it because of you, Cassie said. Every day, when I wanted to give up, I'd think about you, about the ranch, about coming home. That's what kept me alive. The ambulance pulled into the hospital emergency bay. Paramedics swarmed, transferring Cassie to a hospital gurney, wheeling her through automatic doors into a world of fluorescent lights and antiseptic smells. Elena stayed close, even when nurses tried to guide her to a waiting room. She'd spent 12 years waiting. She wasn't going to be separated from her daughter now. A doctor appeared, young and competent looking. I'm Dr. Martinez. I'll be doing the examination. You're the mother? Elena Hartwell. Ms. Hartwell, I'm going to need you to step out while we... She stays, Cassie said, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. She doesn't leave. Dr. Martinez looked at Elena, then back at Cassie. All right, but I need to do a thorough examination, which means... I know what it means, Cassie interrupted. Just do what you need to do. The examination took 2 hours. Dr. Martinez was gentle but thorough, documenting everything, taking samples for the rape kit that would become evidence in prosecution. Elena held Cassie's hand through all of it, looking away when Cassie needed her to, staying present when Cassie gripped her hand so hard it hurt. "You're remarkably healthy considering," Dr. Martinez said finally, snapping off his gloves. "Your body has been through trauma, but you're young and resilient. Physically, you're going to be fine. Emotionally, that's a longer road. I'm recommending counseling, support groups for survivors." "Later," Cassie said. "Right now, I just want to go home. We need to keep you overnight for observation. Make sure your electrolytes stabilize. Get some nutrients in you through 4. Tomorrow, if everything looks good, you can be discharged." After Dr. Martinez left, a nurse came in to set up the 4 and get Cassie settled in a regular room. Agent Chin appeared shortly after, carrying 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. "Thought you could use this," she said, handing one to Elena. "Any news?" Elena asked. "We've arrested 17 people so far. Guards, drivers, facilitators. We found 8 of the trafficking victims. They're all getting medical care. Still looking for Dalton Vickers, but we've frozen his assets, seized his properties, and issued warrants for his arrest. He's not going to get far." "What happens now?" Cassie asked from the bed. "Now we build the case. We'll need your full statement, probably multiple interviews. There will be a grand jury, then trials, lots of trials, since we're going after everyone involved. It's going to take months, maybe years. And it's going to be hard, Cassie. You'll have to testify, relive everything you went through. I'm ready. I've been ready for 12 years. Agent Chin smiled. "I believe you, but for tonight, just rest. Recover. Tomorrow's soon enough to start the formal process." After Agent Chin left, Elena pulled a chair close to Cassie's bed. Hospital sounds filtered through the door, beeping monitors, squeaking carts, distant conversations. But inside the room, everything was quiet. "I never stopped looking," Elena said. "Even when everyone else said to give up, even when they said you'd run away, I never stopped believing you were out there somewhere. I know. That's what kept me going. Knowing you were out there, knowing you were waiting for me to come home. Tell me about the other girls, the ones who escaped with you." Cassie's expression grew distant. "There were originally 8 of us at the compound. Different ages, different backgrounds. Some had been there longer than me. We became, I don't know, not exactly friends, because friendship implies choice. But we protected each other, looked out for each other, shared information. How did you plan the escape?" "We didn't really. Not as a group. It was too dangerous to discuss openly. They were always watching, always listening. But about 6 months ago, I found a tunnel. And once I started stocking it with supplies, some of the other girls noticed. They didn't say anything directly, but they started leaving things where I could find them. Extra food, batteries, warm clothes. They were helping you prepare." "Yeah. And then 3 weeks ago, they brought in a new girl, Lily. She was only 16. They were breaking her down the same way they broke all of us down. And one night, I couldn't anymore. I couldn't watch another girl go through what we'd been through. So I told them all. I told them about the tunnel, about my plan. And I asked one to run. How many said yes?" 7. Everyone but one girl, Rachel. She'd been there longest, almost 15 years. She was too scared to try. She said she didn't remember how to be free anymore. Cassie's voice cracked. "I tried to convince her, but she wouldn't come. That's not your fault. I know, but I still think about her. Still wonder if she's okay. We'll find her." Agent Chin said they found multiple victims at different properties. Rachel might be one of them. Cassie nodded, but Elena could see the doubt in her eyes. The fear that some of the girls wouldn't make it, wouldn't survive this. A nurse came in to check Cassie's foreign vitals, smiled at them both, then left. Cassie's eyes were starting to droop, exhaustion winning out over adrenaline. "Sleep?" Elena said, squeezing her daughter's hand. "I'm not going anywhere. I'll be right here when you wake up." "Promise?" "I promise." Cassie's eyes closed. Within minutes, her breathing had evened out into the deep rhythm of sleep. Elena sat in the uncomfortable hospital chair and watched her daughter rest, memorizing every detail of her face, still unable to fully believe she was real, was here, was safe. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Vickers just turned himself into FBI in Seattle. Said he wants to cooperate. Chin says it's probably a ploy for a plea deal, but they've got him in custody. Elena read the message twice, then looked at Cassie's sleeping face. It was over. Really over. The men who'd taken her daughter, who'd held her captive for 12 years, who'd tried to break her spirit. They were all in custody or on the run. And Cassie was free. Elena closed her eyes and let herself cry. Really cry, for the first time since Cassie had disappeared. 12 years of held-back tears. 12 years of grief and rage and helpless fear. All of it pouring out in silent sobs that shook her shoulders. A hand touched hers. Elena opened her eyes to find Cassie awake, looking at her with concern. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," Elena said, wiping her eyes. "I'm perfect, because you're here." Cassie shifted over in the hospital bed, making room. "Come here." "There's not enough space." "Mom, come here." Elena carefully climbed onto the narrow bed, lay beside her daughter like she used to when Cassie was small and had nightmares. Cassie rested her head on Elena's shoulder, and they lay there together, two survivors finding their way back to each other after 12 years of forced separation. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains. Inside, a mother and daughter held each other and began the long process of healing. Part 3, the vindication. 3 months after Cassie's rescue, Elena stood in a federal courtroom in Helena, Montana, watching as Dalton Vickers was led to the defendant's table in handcuffs. He wore an expensive suit and maintained an expression of dignified disdain, as if this whole proceeding was beneath him. Elena wanted to hate him, wanted to feel rage every time she looked at his face. But mostly she just felt tired. Tired of the fight, tired of the process, tired of reliving everything over and over again as the investigation continued. Cassie sat beside her, with Agent Chun on her other side. Over the past 3 months, Cassie had been interviewed 17 times by various law enforcement agencies. She'd given testimony to a grand jury. She'd identified photographs, reviewed documents, provided details that helped investigators connect Vickers to dozens of properties and hundreds of financial transactions. The case had become national news. The Montana trafficking ring headlines screamed. Reporters camped outside Elena's ranch for weeks until she threatened them with her rifle, and they'd finally gotten the message that she wasn't granting interviews. But today was different. Today was Vickers' arraignment, where he would plead to the charges against him. And the prosecutor had asked Elena and Cassie to be present. The judge, a stern woman named Margaret Paulson, called the court to order. "Mr. Vickers, you are charged with 47 counts, including racketeering, human trafficking, kidnapping, sexual exploitation of minors, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. How do you plead?" Vickers' lawyer, a slick man in a suit more expensive than Elena's truck, stood up. "Your Honor, my client wishes to enter a plea of not guilty to all charges." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Agent Chun had warned them this would happen, that Vickers would plead not guilty even though the evidence against him was overwhelming, because it gave his lawyers time to negotiate a plea deal. "Very well," Judge Paulson said. "Trial is set for..." "Your Honor," the prosecutor, a woman named Jessica Morales, stood up. "The United States requests that bail be denied. Mr. Vickers is a flight risk with significant financial resources and connections in multiple countries. Mr. Vickers has surrendered himself voluntarily." His lawyer protested. "He's been cooperating with the investigation." He surrendered only after federal agents seized his primary properties and froze his accessible assets. Morales shot back, and his cooperation has consisted primarily of trying to blame his employees for crimes he personally ordered. He's facing life in prison, Your Honor. He has every incentive to flee. Judge Paulson looked at Vickers for a long moment. "Bail is denied. Mr. Vickers will remain in federal custody until trial." Vickers' expression finally cracked, showing anger beneath the calm mask. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering urgently, but the lawyer just shook his head. "This court is adjourned," Judge Paulson said, banging her gavel. As the courtroom cleared, Morales approached Elena and Cassie. "That went exactly as we expected. His lawyer will file appeals on the bail denial, but they won't win. Vickers isn't going anywhere. When will the trial start?" Cassie asked. "Realistically, 8 to 10 months. We have a lot of evidence to organize, a lot of witnesses to prepare, and his defense team will file every motion they can think of to delay and obstruct. But we'll get there." "And the other men?" Elena asked. "The guards, the drivers?" "We're prosecuting them separately. Some are already talking, trying to make deals. The guard who sabotaged Rachel Miller's escape attempt last year, he's offered to testify against Vickers in exchange for a reduced sentence." Cassie's hand tightened on Elena's arm at the mention of Rachel. They still didn't know what had happened to her. The main compound had been empty when FBI raided it. All the victims moved to other locations. Rachel was one of 3 girls still unaccounted for. As if reading Cassie's mind, Agent Chen spoke up. "We're still looking for the missing victims. We have leads, Cassie. We're not giving up." "I know. I can't stop thinking about them." They left the courthouse through a side entrance to avoid the reporters clustered on the front steps. Agent Chen had arranged for a federal marshal to drive them back to Elena's ranch, a precaution that would continue until the trial was over. The drive took 2 hours, winding through mountains that were snow-covered now, the peaks white against blue sky. Cassie stared out the window, watching the landscape pass. She'd been doing that a lot lately, just looking at things, as if she couldn't quite believe she was free to see them. "You okay?" Elena asked quietly. "Yeah, just thinking. About how strange it feels to go to court, to see Vickers sitting there in handcuffs. For so many years, he was this terrifying figure, untouchable, powerful, and now he's just a sad old man who's going to die in prison. Does it feel like justice?" Cassie considered. "It feels like the beginning of justice, but there's still so much left to do." What Cassie didn't say, but what Elena knew she was thinking, was that the 3 missing girls weighed on her. Lily, who Cassie had tried to save that first night, Michelle, who'd been in the compound longest, and Rachel, who'd been too scared to run. When they arrived at the ranch, the marshal did a security check of property before leaving. Elena had installed new locks on all the buildings, motion sensor lights around the perimeter, and a security system that connected to her phone. She felt foolish sometimes, like she was overreacting, but Cassie said it made her feel safer, so Elena kept it all running. Inside the cabin, Elena made coffee while Cassie sat at the table, absently petting one of the barn cats who'd adopted them. The cabin was crowded now with 2 people living in it, but they were making it work. Elena had plans to add on a room come spring, giving Cassie her own space. Marcus called while we were in court, Elena said, checking her phone messages. Says he has some information about the financial investigation. Wants to know if he can stop by tomorrow. That's fine. Marcus had become a regular presence in their lives over the past 3 months. He'd testified before the grand jury about the original investigation into Cassie's disappearance, explaining how it had been prematurely closed. His testimony had been key in adding conspiracy and obstruction charges to Vickers' indictment. "Mom," Cassie said suddenly, "I want to do something." "Okay, what?" "I want to help find the missing girls. Not officially. I know I can't be part of the investigation, but I know things about how Vickers' network operated, places they might hide victims that weren't in the documents I gathered. I could consult, maybe help Agent Chen's team think through possibilities." Elena sat down across from her daughter. "Are you sure? It might mean going back to some dark places mentally." "I've never left those dark places," Cassie said. "Not really. Every night when I close my eyes, I'm back there. I hear the other girls crying. I hear the guards' footsteps. I remember every single thing they did to us." "Cassie, I'm in therapy. I know it's going to take time to process everything, but I can't just sit here waiting for trial while those girls are still out there. I can't." "Then we'll talk to Agent Chun. See what you can do to help." Cassie's expression softened with relief. Thank you. They spent the evening like they'd spent most evenings since Cassie came home. Cooking together, talking about small things, avoiding the big topics that still loomed. Elena told stories about what had happened on the ranch over the past 12 years. Cassie talked about books she wanted to read, places she wanted to see, a normal life she was just starting to imagine might be possible. Later, after Cassie had gone to bed in the loft, Elena sat by the wood stove with a cup of tea and her phone. She scrolled through messages from people she hadn't heard from in years. Former ranger colleagues, old friends, even some distant family members who'd reached out after seeing the news coverage. One message caught her attention. It was from a woman named Patricia Grant, who identified herself as Rachel Miller's mother. Ms. Hartwell, I saw you and your daughter at the courthouse today. I can't tell you how happy I am that you found Cassie alive. It gives me hope that Rachel might still be out there too. I know Cassie and Rachel were held together. If there's any chance you could ask Cassie to talk to me, to tell me anything about my daughter, what she was like, how she survived, it would mean everything to me. I'm staying at the Holiday Inn in Bozeman, room 237. I'll be here for another week, hoping for news. Sincerely, Patricia Grant. Elena read the message 3 times, her heart aching for this woman, who was living the nightmare Elena had just escaped. She wanted to respond immediately, to offer comfort, to say that, of course, Cassie would talk to her. But it wasn't Elena's choice to make. This was Cassie's trauma, Cassie's memories, Cassie's decision about what to share and with whom. The next morning, Elena showed Cassie the message. Her daughter read it silently, tears welling in her eyes. Rachel talked about her mom sometimes, Cassie said quietly. She said her mom made the best cinnamon rolls, that she always knew when Rachel was sad before Rachel even said anything. She missed her so much. Do you want to meet with Patricia? I don't know if I can tell her what she wants to hear. She'd been broken down so much by the time I knew her. She barely remembered her life before, and she was so scared, so convinced that if she tried to escape, something terrible would happen. Patricia isn't asking for good news. She's just asking to know her daughter was remembered, that she mattered to someone. Cassie nodded slowly. Okay, set up a meeting, but not here, somewhere neutral. They arranged to meet Patricia at a small cafe in Bozeman 2 days later. Marcus came with them, sitting at a nearby table to give them privacy, but staying close in case Cassie needed support. Patricia Grant was in her late 50s, with graying hair and eyes that held the particular exhaustion of someone who'd spent years searching for answers. She stood when Cassie and Elena entered, her hands trembling. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for agreeing to see me. They sat at a corner booth, ordered coffee none of them would drink, and Cassie began to talk. She told Patricia about meeting Rachel at the compound 5 years ago, about how Rachel had taught her tricks for surviving the guards' attention, about how Rachel had shared her limited food when Cassie first arrived and was refusing to eat. She was kind, Cassie said, even after everything they'd done to her. Even after 15 years of captivity, she was still kind. She protected the younger girls. She gave us hope when we had none. Was she? Patricia's voice broke. Was she treated terribly? Yes, Cassie said, because lies would help no one. They treated all of us terribly. But Rachel survived. She found ways to protect her mind, to remember who she was. She told me once that every night before she fell asleep, she'd recite her own name, her mother's name, her address from childhood, like a prayer, like a promise that she was still real, still herself. Patricia was crying openly now. Do you think she's still alive? I think if anyone could survive this, it's Rachel. She's the strongest person I've ever known. And Agent Chen's team is still looking. They haven't given up. They talked for another hour, Patricia asking questions and Cassie answering as best she could. Some of the questions were hard, about the abuse, about the conditions, about whether Rachel had anyone who made her captivity easier. Cassie answered honestly, gently, giving Patricia the truth she deserved. When they finally left the cafe, Patricia hugged Cassie so tightly Elena thought her daughter might break. Thank you, Patricia whispered. Thank you for remembering her, for making sure she wasn't alone. She wasn't alone, Cassie said, and she won't be forgotten. I promise you that. In the car driving home, Cassie was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "We have to find them, Mom. The 3 missing girls. We have to. We will." Elena said, praying she was right. 2 days later, Agent Chen called with news. "We found Michelle Browning." Elena put her on speakerphone so Cassie could hear. Where was she? A truck stop in Idaho Falls. She'd been hiding there for 2 weeks, too scared to come forward. A waitress recognized her from the photos we'd been circulating. "Michelle's safe now, getting medical care." "That's 2, Cassie said. "What about Lily and Rachel?" "Still looking. But I need to talk to you about something else. We've been analyzing Vickers' property records and financial transactions. There's one property that keeps appearing in coded references in his communications, but we can't figure out where it is. The references are all vague. The mountain location, the secure facility, the final placement. We think it might be where he kept the high-profile victims, the ones whose families had money for ransom or political connections. You think Rachel and Lily might be there. It's possible. Cassie, I know this is asking a lot, but I need you to look at these communications. See if anything triggers a memory, anything that might help us locate this property. Send them over. I'll look at everything." That evening, Agent Chen arrived at the ranch with a tablet loaded with encrypted communications, financial records, and property documents. Cassie spent hours going through them, Elena sitting beside her, both of them searching for patterns. "Wait," Cassie said suddenly, pointing at a series of texts between Vickers and someone identified only as facility manager. This conversation, they're talking about the canyon property and keeping the merchandise isolated until the buyer confirms. "We've seen that reference before," Agent Chen said, "but we don't know which property they mean. Vickers owned or controlled dozens of properties near canyons. But look at this." Cassie scrolled to another document, this expense report from 6 months ago. "Repairs to secure room, canyon location, high-altitude winter supplies." High altitude means at least 8,000 feet, and winter supplies mean it's somewhere that gets snowed in. Elena leaned forward. How many of Vickers' properties meet those criteria? Agent Chen was already typing on her laptop. 17 properties above 8,000 feet in Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. But only 3 are near canyons significant enough to be called the canyon properties specifically. She pulled up a map showing 3 locations. One in the Bridger Mountains north of Bozeman, one in the Wind River Range in Wyoming, and one in the Tobacco Root Mountains, less than 20 miles from Elena's ranch. Cassie's finger stabbed at the 3rd location. "There, that has to be it." "What makes you so sure?" "Because I've been there. Not inside. I was never taken there. But one time when they were moving us between properties, the van broke down. We were stranded for a few hours while they got a replacement vehicle. I remember looking out the window at this narrow canyon with steep walls, and one of the guards said something about how we were close to the facility, but they weren't going to move us there because it was for special cases only. Can you remember anything else about the location?" Cassie closed her eyes, thinking. There was an old mining sign, something about the Trapper's Canyon claim, and I remember seeing a very narrow dirt road leading up the canyon, barely wide enough for one vehicle. Agent Chen was already searching property records. "Got it. Trapper's Canyon, Tobacco Root Mountains. Property purchased 8 years ago by Mountain Shadows, LLC, which is, let me guess," Elena said, "a subsidiary of Vickers Property Management." "Bingo. The property is listed as undeveloped wilderness, but according to these records, they've been running power lines up there, drilling a well, bringing in supplies." "Then let's go get them," Cassie said, standing up. "We need warrants first, and we need to go in carefully. If there are guards on site." "I don't care about guards. Rachel and Lily have been there for 3 months. We can't wait any longer." Agent Chen looked at Elena, who nodded. "She's right. If there's a chance those girls are there, we need to move now." "All right, let me make some calls." Within 3 hours, Agent Chen had coordinated a tactical team. They met at a staging area 5 miles from the canyon location. FBI agents, local sheriff's deputies who've been vetted and cleared, and a medical team standing by. Same rules as before. Agent Chin told Elena and Cassie, "You stay in the vehicles until we secure the property." "Understood," Cassie said, though Elena could see her daughter's hands clenching and unclenching nervously. The convoy of vehicles moved up the dirt road Agent Chun had identified, bouncing over ruts and rocks. The road was barely maintained, suggesting it wasn't used regularly. That could mean the property was abandoned, or it could mean Vickers wanted to keep it isolated. The canyon opened up ahead, its walls rising sharply on both sides. At the far end, barely visible in the late afternoon shadows, was a structure built into the canyon wall itself. More bunker than building, constructed to be nearly invisible from the air. The vehicle stopped a quarter-mile away, and the tactical team deployed on foot. Elena watched through binoculars as agents approached the structure from multiple angles, moving with practiced precision. "FBI, we have a warrant. Come out with your hands visible." Nothing. No response, no movement. The agents breached the door. 5 minutes passed. 10. Elena's heart hammered in her chest. Cassie's hand tightened hers. Then Agent Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "Structure secured. We've got 2 victims inside. They're alive. I repeat, both victims are alive and responsive." Cassie's breath came out in a sob. "Is one of them Rachel?" Agent Chen's voice came back after a pause. "Cassie, we need you up here. One of the girls won't talk to us. She says she'll only talk to you." Cassie was out of the vehicle before Elena could stop her, running up the road toward the structure. Elena followed, her own legs unsteady with relief and residual fear. Inside, the structure was exactly as grim as Elena had imagined, a concrete bunker divided into cells, each one barely large enough to lie down in. The air was stale, the only light coming from bare bulbs hanging from the ceiling. In one cell, paramedics were attending to a young girl, who looked maybe 17, dark hair matted and eyes wide with fear. In another cell, Rachel Miller sat with her back against the wall, her knees pulled to her chest, refusing to look at anyone. "Rachel," Cassie said softly, kneeling at the cell entrance. "It's me. It's Cassie." Rachel's head came up slowly. Her eyes, which Elena had seen in photographs provided by Patricia Grant, were hollow and distant. But when she saw Cassie, something flickered there. Recognition. "Hope, you came back," Rachel whispered. "I came back. And I brought help. Your mom is looking for you, Rachel." She never stopped looking. "Mom." "Patricia Grant. She's been searching for you for 18 years. She hasn't given up. She's waiting for you in Bozeman right now." Rachel started crying then. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to come from somewhere she kept locked away for years. Cassie moved into cell and wrapped her arms around Rachel, holding her while she cried. "You're safe now," Cassie murmured. "You're going home. All of us are going home." The paramedics got both girls into ambulances, started IVs and oxygen, checked vitals, and documented injuries. Rachel wouldn't let go of Cassie's hand, so Cassie rode with her to the hospital, Elena following in Agent Chen's vehicle. "That's all of them," Agent Chen said as they drove. "All 8 victims from the main compound, accounted for and safe, plus 6 from other properties, and 11 from the networks we dismantled using Cassie's evidence. 25 women and girls rescued total. How many people in custody?" 43. Guards, drivers, facilitators, customers, and Vickers himself. "What happens to the victims now?" "That depends on what they want. Some have families to return to. Others will need housing assistance, job training, therapy. The FBI has a victims assistance program, but honestly, for something this large-scale, we're still figuring it out as we go." At the hospital, Patricia Grant was waiting. Agent Chin had called her during the drive, told her that Rachel had been found. When they wheeled Rachel through the emergency doors, Patricia ran to her daughter, tears streaming down her face. "Rachel, baby, I'm here. I'm here." Rachel looked at her mother with eyes that didn't quite seem to comprehend. 18 years was a long time. She'd been 15 when she was taken, 33 now. More than half her life spent in captivity. But as Patricia kept talking, kept touching Rachel's face and hair and hands, kept saying her name over and over. Something shifted. Rachel's eyes focused. Her hand reached out and gripped Patricia's. Mom. Yes, baby. I'm here. I've got you now. Elena turned away, giving them privacy. Cassie stood beside her, watching with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. What are you thinking? Elena asked. I'm thinking about all the years Rachel lost. All the years all of us lost. And I'm thinking about how we're never getting that time back. We can heal, we can move forward, but those years are just gone. That's not your fault. I know, but it still feels like a loss. Like we should be compensated somehow for all that stolen time. Elena put her arm around her daughter. You will be, through the civil suits, through victim compensation funds. But more than that, you will be compensated by getting to live the rest of your life free, by getting to choose what comes next. What if I don't know what comes next? Then you figure it out as you go, same as everyone else. They stayed at the hospital until both Rachel and Lily were settled in rooms, stable and safe. Then Elena drove Cassie back to the ranch through darkness, both of them exhausted beyond words. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story. Epilogue. 1 year later. Elena stood on her newly expanded porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The cabin had grown over the past year. 2 additional rooms, a real bathroom with running hot water, solar panels that provided enough power for laptops and lights. The isolation she once craved had transformed into something else. A refuge, yes, but one with room for others. Cassie came out carrying 2 cups of coffee, handing one to Elena before settling into the rocking chair they'd bought in town. Rachel called last night, Cassie said. She and her mom are doing well. She's enrolled in community college, taking art classes. Says she's actually pretty good at it. That's wonderful. And Lily got accepted to the University of Montana. Full scholarship. She's going to study social work, wants to help other survivors. Elena smiled. Over the past year, she'd watched Cassie build a network with the other survivors, creating a support system that went beyond what any official program could provide. They called it the Mountain Women's Circle, a name that felt both powerful and fitting. What time is everyone arriving? Elena asked. Around 10. Michelle's driving up from Billings. Sandra and her sister are flying in from Idaho. Patricia's bringing Rachel, of course. Today was the 1-year anniversary of the final rescues. The women, victims felt like the wrong word now, had decided to mark the occasion together, not with grief, but with celebration. A year of freedom, a year of healing, a year of reclaiming their lives. How are you feeling about the trial starting next month? Elena asked. Cassie took a sip of coffee, considering. Ready. More than ready. I want to look Vickers in the face and tell him he didn't break me. He didn't break any of us. The trial had been delayed multiple times by Vickers' legal team, but it was finally set to begin. 47 counts, 25 victims prepared to testify. The prosecution was calling it one of the most comprehensive trafficking cases in U.S. history. Agent Chun says they're expecting guilty verdicts on every count, Cassie continued, which means life in prison without parole. He'll never hurt anyone again. Good. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the horses graze in the meadow below. Elena had expanded her herd, was training horses not just to sell, but to use in a therapeutic riding program Cassie had started. Equine therapy for survivors of trauma. It was small, just a handful of women right now, but it was growing. A memory came to Elena then, sharp and clear. The dying bay mare, standing at the tunnel entrance, using the last of her strength to lead Elena to the truth. Star, Cassie had called her. The smart horse who'd understood somehow that she needed to find help. They'd buried Star near the tunnel entrance, marked the spot with a cairn of stones. On clear days, when Elena rode out to check the far pastures, she'd stop there and say thank you to a horse who'd save her daughter's life. You think Star somehow knew? Cassie asked, as if reading Elena's thoughts, that she understood what she was doing. I think animals know things we can't explain. Your grandfather always said that. I miss him. Wish he could see what we built here. He can. I'm sure of it. By noon, the ranch was full of women. Survivors, family members, supporters. They gathered in the meadow, sharing food and stories and laughter. Someone had brought a guitar, and they sang songs that echoed off the mountains. Patricia Grant found Elena near the corral, where Elena was showing a few of the women how to approach the horses safely. I wanted to thank you again, Patricia said, for what your daughter did for Rachel, for all of them. Cassie did it herself. All I did was stay alive long enough to be here when she needed me. That's not nothing. You raised a remarkable woman. She survived because you gave her the tools to survive. Elena thought about that, about the survey maps her father had taught Cassie to read, about the survival skills Elena had passed down, about the stubborn determination that ran in their family like bedrock beneath soil. We all survived because we refused to give up on each other, Elena said. That's what matters. As the afternoon wore on, Cassie gathered the group together. I want to do something, she announced. A ritual, kind of, to mark this year and look forward to the next. She brought a large wooden box, and from it she pulled slips of paper and pens. I want everyone to write down something they're leaving behind. A fear, a trauma, something that's been weighing on them. And then write down something they're moving toward. A hope, a dream, a goal. The women took their papers and pens, finding quiet spaces to write. Elena watched them. Cassie and Rachel and Lily and Michelle and all the others, women who'd survived things that should have destroyed them, who were building new lives from the wreckage. Elena took her own slip of paper and wrote, I'm leaving behind the belief that I failed my daughter. I'm moving toward a future where we both get to choose who we become. They burned the leaving behind parts in a fire pit Cassie had prepared, watching the smoke carry their burdens toward the sky. Then they read their moving toward statement aloud, one by one, claiming their futures in their own voices. I'm moving toward becoming a teacher, Rachel said. I want to help kids who feel lost, like I felt before I was taken. I'm moving toward trusting people again, Michelle said. I want to believe the world has more good than bad. I'm moving toward being fearless, Lily said. I want to try everything I missed. Skydiving and surfing and falling in love and traveling the world. When it was Cassie's turn, she stood with the sun behind her, making her seem lit from within. I'm moving toward becoming the person I was meant to be, not defined by what was done to me, but by what I choose to do next. I'm moving toward helping other survivors find their voices. And I'm moving toward forgiveness, not the men who hurt us, but myself, for all the times I thought I wasn't strong enough to survive. As the sun set behind the mountains, the women lit candles, creating a circle of light in the growing darkness. They stood together, these survivors, these warriors, these ordinary women who'd done extraordinary things just by refusing to give up. Elena looked around the circle and felt something settle in her chest. Not quite peace. She wasn't sure she'd ever feel completely peaceful again. But something close. Something like contentment. Something like hope. The dying horse had led her to a tunnel. The tunnel had led her to evidence. The evidence had led her to Cassie. And Cassie had led them all here, to this moment, to this circle of light in the wilderness. Sometimes, Elena thought, the hardest prisons are the ones we build for ourselves. But sometimes, if we're very lucky, someone shows us where the door is, and if we're brave enough, we walk through it into a life we never imagined possible. The mountains stood eternal around them, indifferent and beautiful. The horses grazed peacefully in the meadow. And Elena Hartwell, who'd spent 12 years isolated by grief and fear, stood among women who'd survived things she could barely imagine, and felt herself part of something larger than her own pain. The tunnel had held more than evidence. It had held hope. Hope that Cassie had carefully stocked and protected. Hope that she'd maintained even when everything else was being stripped away. And now that hope had blossomed into something real, something tangible, something worth celebrating. As the women began to drift toward the cabin for dinner, Cassie hung back, standing with Elena at the edge of the meadow. "Thank you, Mom," she said quietly, "for never giving up on me. Thank you for surviving long enough for me to find you. We found each other. With a little help from a smart horse who knew exactly where to lead you, they stood together in the gathering dusk, mother and daughter, survivors both, watching the last light fade from the mountains. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the trial, the continued healing, the slow work of building lives from nothing. But tonight, they had this moment, this peace, this proof that even the darkest tunnels could lead toward light. And that was enough. That was everything. 5 months after the anniversary gathering, Elena sat in a packed federal courtroom in Helena, watching the jury file back in after 3 days of deliberation. The trial had lasted 7 weeks. 7 weeks of testimony from 25 survivors, from FBI agents, from financial experts who traced millions of dollars through shell companies and offshore accounts. Cassie sat beside her, flanked by Rachel and Lily on the other side. Behind them, the courtroom was filled with other survivors and their families, reporters from national news outlets, and advocates who'd traveled from across the country to witness what many were calling the most significant human trafficking prosecution in Montana history. Dalton Vickers sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive suits and air of superiority long gone. He'd aged visibly over the past year in federal custody. His hair had gone completely gray, his face gaunt, his shoulders slumped. His legal team had tried everything. Motions to suppress evidence, challenges to witness credibility, arguments that he was merely a businessman whose employees had acted without his knowledge. None of it had worked. Cassie's documentation had been too thorough, too detailed, too damning. The judge, the same Margaret Paulson who denied Vickers bail 18 months ago, called a court to order. Has the jury reached a verdict? The jury foreman, a rancher from Gallatin County, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the count of racketeering, how do you find? Guilty. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Cassie's hand found Elena's, gripping tight. On the counts of human trafficking, 47 counts total. How do you find? Guilty on all counts. The murmur grew louder. One of the survivors in the back row let out a sob of relief. On the counts of kidnapping, guilty on all counts. Sexual exploitation of minors, guilty. Money laundering, guilty. Conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. It took 15 minutes for Foreman to read all 47 guilty verdicts. With each one, Vickers seemed to shrink further, his shoulders curving inward, his face paling. His lawyer sat silent, knowing there was nothing left to say. When the foreman finally sat down, Judge Paulson addressed the courtroom. Mr. Vickers, the jury has found you guilty on all counts. Sentencing is scheduled for 6 weeks from today. Until then, you will remain in federal custody. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down and the courtroom erupted. Survivors were hugging each other, crying, laughing. Reporters rushed for the exits to file their stories. Family members who'd spent years searching for answers finally had them, finally had justice. Elena pulled Cassie into her arms, holding her daughter while she cried. It's over, Elena whispered. It's really over. He's going to die in prison, Cassie said, pulling back to wipe her eyes. He's 64 years old. With the sentencing guidelines for these convictions, he'll get life without parole. He'll never see daylight again except through prison bars. Rachel appeared beside them. Patricia Grant right behind her. We did it, Rachel said, her voice stronger than Elena had ever heard it. We stood up there and told our stories, and they believed us. Of course they believed you, Patricia said, one arm around her daughter. You told the truth. That's all it took. Outside the courthouse, a press conference had been set up. Federal prosecutors, FBI agents, and victim advocates stood at a podium bristling with microphones. Agent Sarachin stepped forward to speak. Today, justice was served for 25 women and girls who survived one of the most extensive human trafficking operations ever prosecuted in the United States. Dalton Vickers used his legitimate business empire to conceal a network that kidnapped and exploited victims for nearly 2 decades. But he underestimated the strength and courage of his victims, particularly Cassandra Hartwell. Agent Chin looked directly at Cassie, who stood at the edge of the crowd with Elena. Ms. Hartwell spent 12 years in captivity, but she never stopped fighting. She documented every aspect of the operation, build an evidentiary case that was more thorough than what many trained investigators could produce, and risked her life to protect other victims. Without her courage, without her evidence, Dalton Vickers might still be operating today. Reporters immediately swarmed toward Cassie, shouting questions. Elena moved to intercept them. But Cassie stepped forward, raising a hand for quiet. "I'll make one statement," Cassie said, her voice carrying across the courthouse steps. "And then I'm done talking to press forever." The reporters settled, cameras focusing on her. "For 12 years, I survived by refusing to forget who I was. I survived by documenting the truth, by protecting the other women held with me, by believing that someday, somehow, justice would come. Today it did. But this verdict isn't just for me. It's for Rachel Miller, who survived 18 years of captivity. It's for Lily Chun, who was only 16 when she was taken. It's for Michelle Browning, for Sandra Martinez, for every single woman who testified here. And it's for the ones we haven't found yet, the ones still trapped in systems like the one Vickers built." Cassie's voice grew stronger. Human trafficking isn't something that only happens in other countries or in movies. It happens here in small towns and big cities, in places you'd never expect. The man convicted today on legitimate businesses, donated to charities, looked like an upstanding citizen. That's what made him so dangerous. That's what makes this system so hard to fight. She looked directly at the cameras. If you're being held against your will, if someone is threatening you or controlling you, if you're afraid to ask for help, please know that there are people looking for you. There are people who will believe you. The National Human Trafficking Hotline is 1-888-373-7888. Call it, text it, use it. You are not forgotten. Cassie stepped back then, and Elena moved beside her, creating a wall between her daughter and the still shouting reporters. Marcus Reed appeared from somewhere in the crowd, helping to clear a path to the waiting vehicle. In the car, Cassie was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "I never want to do that again." "You don't have to," Elena assured her. "You've done your part, more than your part." "Have I, though? There's still so many others out there." Vickers' network extended to 6 states. "We only rescued 43 victims, but his financial record suggests he moved hundreds of women and girls over 2 decades. Where are the rest?" "The FBI is still investigating. They'll find them." "Will they?" Cassie stared out the window at the passing Montana landscape. "Or will they move on to the next case, the next crisis, and all those other victims will just become statistics?" Elena didn't have an answer for that, because Cassie was right. There was only so much law enforcement could do, only so many resources to dedicate to cases that were closed, technically speaking, once the primary perpetrator was convicted. 6 weeks later, they returned to the courthouse for sentencing. The courtroom was less crowded this time, mostly survivors, their families, and a handful of reporters. Vickers was brought in wearing the same orange jumpsuit, his wrists and ankles shackled. Judge Paulson reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, the victim impact statements, the prosecution's recommendations. Then she looked at Vickers directly. "Mr. Vickers, the court has received 43 victim impact statements. I'm going to allow 3 of them to be read aloud. The first is from Cassandra Hartwell." Cassie stood, her hand steady as she held her written statement. "Your Honor, I was 17 years old when Dalton Vickers' organization kidnapped me. I spent 12 years in captivity. 12 years during which I was moved between properties, exploited, and subjected to conditions I won't detail here because they're already in the record. But I want the court to understand that those 12 years weren't just time taken from me. They were my entire young adulthood. I should have gone to college, started a career, fallen in love, traveled, made mistakes, learned from them. Instead, I learned how to survive in captivity. I learned how to hide my humanity so deep inside myself that my captors couldn't touch it. I learned how to document evidence while pretending to be broken." Cassie looked at Vickers. "You took 12 years from me, but you didn't take everything. You didn't take my mind, my memory, or my determination to see justice done. And you didn't take my future. I have that now. You don't." She sat down, and Rachel Miller stood next. "Your Honor, I was 15 when I was taken. I'm 33 now. I spent 18 years in captivity, more than half my life. I lost my high school years, my 20s, my early 30s. I lost a chance to go to prom, to graduate, to figure out who I wanted to be. When I was finally rescued, I had to relearn how to interact with people, how to trust, how to function in normal society. I'm still learning. I'll probably be learning for the rest of my life. Rachel's voice was steady, though tears ran down her face. But I'm learning. I'm in college now. I'm studying art. I'm rebuilding a relationship with my mother. I'm making friends. I'm living. And Dalton Vickers is never going to do any of those things again. That's justice. The third statement came from Lily Chun, who was now 18 and enrolled at the University of Montana. Your Honor, I was 16 when I was taken. I'd been in captivity for only 2 months when Cassie Hartwell helped me escape. 2 months isn't 18 years or 12 years, but was long enough to understand what the other women had survived. Long enough to know that if Cassie hadn't acted when she did, I could have been there for years, decades, the rest of my life. Lily looked at Vickers with something like pity. I'm 18 now. I'm in college studying social work because I want to help other survivors. I want to turn what happened to me into something that helps other people. You can't do that, Mr. Vickers. You can't turn any of this into something good. You can only sit in a cell and think about what you did. And I hope you think about it every single day for the rest of your life. After the statements, Judge Paulson spoke. Mr. Vickers, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen a case that involves such systematic, calculated cruelty. You built an empire on the suffering of vulnerable women and girls. You treated human beings as commodities to be bought, sold, and discarded. You showed no remorse, no recognition of the harm you caused, no willingness to take responsibility. She consulted her notes. The sentencing guidelines for your convictions call for multiple life sentences. I am sentencing you to 47 consecutive life terms in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will spend the rest of your natural life in custody. You will die in prison, Mr. Vickers, and that is far less than what you deserve. The gavel came down. Vickers was led away, and this time he didn't look back. Outside, Elena and Cassie walked to the parking lot in silence. They'd driven up from the ranch that morning, would drive back tonight, would return to the life they'd been building together. How do you feel? Elena asked. Empty, Cassie admitted. I thought I'd feel triumphant or vindicated, but mostly I just feel empty. Like I've been carrying this weight for so long that now that it's gone, I don't know what to do with the space it left behind. You fill it with something better, something you choose. What if I don't know what to choose? Then you experiment. You try things. You give yourself permission to not know. They reached Elena's truck, but before getting in, Cassie turned to look back at the courthouse. All those other victims we didn't find, what happens to them? We keep looking, Elena said. But we can't carry that burden alone, Cass. You did your part. You documented everything, testified, helped convict the man responsible. Now you have to let yourself heal. I've been in therapy for 1.5 years. I'm healing. I mean really heal. Not just processing trauma, but building a life beyond it. You're 29 years old. You have so many years ahead of you. They should be about more than what was done to you. Cassie was quiet for a moment. The therapeutic writing program, I want to expand it. Rachel's been helping, and we've had 6 new survivors join in the last month. I want to make it bigger, more formal. Maybe get certified as a nonprofit. Apply for grants. Then do it. I'll help however I can. And I've been thinking about going back to school, maybe studying psychology or social work, like Lily, so I can help survivors more effectively. You'd be amazing at that. They climbed into the truck and started the long drive back to the ranch. As they wound through the mountains, Elena's phone rang. It was Marcus Reed. Turn on the news, he said, without preamble. National news. Any channel. Elena pulled over and grabbed her phone, pulling up a news app. The headline made her breath catch. FBI announces nationwide trafficking bust. 127 victims rescued in coordinated raids. She clicked the article, reading rapidly. Using evidence from the Vickers case, The FBI had identified connections to 17 other trafficking networks across the United States. Over the past 3 months, they've been quietly building cases, coordinating with local law enforcement, preparing for simultaneous raids. Today, they'd executed warrants in 12 states. 127 victims had been recovered, 83 people had been arrested, and it had all started with Cassie's evidence. "Oh my God," Cassie whispered, reading over Elena's shoulder. "All those people. Rescue because of you," Elena finished. "Because you documented everything. Because you refused to give up." Cassie's phone started ringing. Agent Chun, calling to tell them personally. Then reporters started calling. Then advocacy organizations wanted to talk about how this case was changing federal trafficking prosecutions. But Elena put the truck in gear and kept driving, heading home to the ranch, to the mountains, to the place where healing happened quietly, away from cameras and headlines. That evening, as the sun set over the Tobacco Root Mountains, Elena and Cassie stood at the cairn-marking Stars burial site. They did this sometimes, when life felt overwhelming, when they needed to remember how everything had started. "Thank you," Cassie said softly to the horse who led her mother to the truth, "for being smarter than they thought, for getting Mom to that tunnel, for saving all of us." Elena added a stone to the cairn, as she did every time they visited. "I used to think animals were just animals," she said. "But Star knew. Somehow, she knew you needed help, knew where to lead me, knew how to get me there even though she was dying." "Maybe she wasn't just smart," Cassie said. "Maybe she was sent by Grandpa or the universe or something we don't understand. Maybe." They stood in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Then Cassie spoke again. 127 people, Mom. 127 women and girls who are free tonight because of that tunnel, because of the evidence I gathered, because of Star leading you there. That's more than I ever imagined. "It's not your burden to carry," Elena reminded her gently. "You can be glad they're safe without feeling responsible for them." "I know, but I can't help thinking. If I'd escaped earlier, if I'd been braver sooner, could I have saved even more?" "Cassie, look at me." Elena waited until her daughter met her eyes. "You were 17 when they took you. 17. You survived 12 years of captivity, protected other victims, documented evidence that's now being used to dismantle networks across the country. And you testified against your captors knowing it meant reliving every trauma. You have nothing to regret. Nothing." Cassie nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'm going to start the nonprofit, the therapeutic writing program, and I'm going to go back to school. I'm going to build something good from all this." "I know you will. But first, I'm going to do something I've been thinking about for months." "What's that?" "I'm going to take a vacation. A real one. Somewhere I've never been. Maybe the ocean. I've never seen the ocean." Elena smiled. "Then let's go. Both of us. We'll close the ranch for a week, get Marcus to check on the horses, and we'll go see the ocean." "Really? Really? You're right. You've been healing, processing, working. But you also deserve to just live, to do something purely for joy." 3 weeks later, Elena and Cassie stood on a beach in Oregon, watching the Pacific Ocean roll endlessly toward the shore. Cassie had never seen anything like it. The vast expanse of water, the way the waves crashed and retreated, the salt smell of the air. "It's beautiful," Cassie said, her voice full of wonder. "It is. I spent 12 years in rooms with no windows, or tiny windows that only showed walls or fences. And now I'm standing here looking at something that goes on forever, something nobody can fence in or control." Elena watched her daughter standing in the surf, letting the waves wash over her feet, her face turned toward the sun. This was healing, too, not just processing trauma in therapy, but experiencing joy, wonder, freedom. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rachel. "Just got accepted to art school. Starting in the fall. Thank you for believing in me." Another text came from Agent Chun. 3 more networks identified using Cassie's evidence. This is going to keep rippling outward. She changed everything. But Elena didn't tell Cassie about the text. Not right now. Right now. Her daughter was walking along the beach, picking up shells, laughing at the seagulls, living in a moment untouched by trauma or responsibility or the weight of everything that had happened. Later, when they were sitting on the beach watching the sunset, Cassie said, "I think I'm going to be okay, Mom. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, I think I'm actually going to be okay." "I know you are," Elena said. "You're the strongest person I've ever known." "I'm not that strong. I just didn't have a choice." "You had a choice every single day. You could have given up, could have stopped documenting, could have retreated so far inside yourself that you never came back. But you didn't. That was a choice. That was strength." Cassie leaned her head on Elena's shoulder. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for looking for 12 years, for being here when I finally made a home. Thank you for surviving long enough for me to find you." They sat together as the sun sank into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Tomorrow they'd drive back to Montana, back to the ranch, back to the work of building their lives. But tonight, they had this, a moment of perfect peace, a moment untouched by the past or worried about the future. Just a mother and daughter, watching the sun set over an ocean neither of them had seen before, grateful for second chances and dying horses who knew exactly where to lead broken hearts. And that was enough. That was everything.